is the news Roundup here on Block TV, and I am Amina Sawane. Thank you for joining us. Tonight on the program, $116 million of Gambian taxpayers' money has been trashed as National Assembly members secondly rejected the draft constitution. The National Association of Vocational and Skills Training Institute, representing all technical and vocational education and training, held a press briefing on 22nd September at Lasting Solutions to express their frustration and disappointment with the continued closure of training institutions and skill centers. African descendants, residents in the Gambia that have reparated permanently, have raised concerns about their own inclusion in the recent 2020 draft constitution. The Gambia Armed Forces is currently struggling with bloated ranks, one of many problems inherited from the 22 years of the past government's unbridled German interference in the affairs of the country's armed forces. The Army said it has now added 2 more infantry battalions to the previous 3 battalions as a way of dealing with the complex problem of having many ranks in a particular battalion. Having registered a series of maternal deaths in the Gambia, a group of concerned citizens, Mbamba Care Foundation, in partnership with Gambian Women's Life Matter, hold a peaceful protest to show their dissatisfaction in the scary rise of maternal mortality in the Gambia. I am Amina Sawane. $116 million of Gambian taxpayers' money has been trashed as National Assembly members shockingly rejected the draft constitution. After 2 days of intense debate, the National Assembly members shockingly rejected the bill after a vote of 31 for yes and 23 for no, thus failing to meet the required threshold of 3/4. Despite spending $116 million of Gambian taxpayers' money in the entire constitutional process, the 2020 draft constitution has been condemned to the bin by the representatives. According to Section 2262, subsection B and 4B of the 1997 Constitution, subsection 2, subject to Section 4, reads, a bill for an act of the National Assembly under this section, that is Section 226, shall not be passed by Assembly or presented to the President for assent unless 2B, the bill is supported on the second and third readings by votes of not less than 3/4 of the members of the National Assembly. Speaker Mariam Jack Denson said the bill was rejected. The 226 bill for an act for the National Assembly altering any of the provisions referred to the subsection 7 shall not be passed by the National Assembly or presented to the President for assent unless 4B, the bill is supported on the second and third reading by the votes of less than 3/4 of the National Assembly members. I'm joined by Sam Fati, a political analyst. Sam, thank you for joining us. Sam, do you see this coming?
Well, the Parliament voting down the draft constitutional bill from moving forward to the third reading should not actually be a surprise to most people that have observed the entire constitutional building process. From the onset, we know that there are a few issues that were going to be a problem in terms of getting this constitution to go through to referendum. Now, while the president did encourage the cabinet to move forward with having it taken to the National Assembly, he was very certain at that particular point in time that with the support he had, they would either have to get a compromise with those that are regarded as his opposition. Now, since that compromise didn't go through and nobody was willing to compromise at all, that draft constitution failed. Now, here were some of the few issues that became a problem. Retroactively applying the term limits became one of the problems, and it was the key problem there. Having the National Assembly confirm political appointees, specifically ministers, instead of protecting their civil service and probably negotiating to have them approve permanent secretaries and directors of companies rather than ministers became one of the problems, and there was an opportunity to compromise there. And curtailing some of the powers of the presidency to an extent that they feel there is no balance, because we were so focused on trying to prevent a dictatorship that power was not certainly balanced in a certain way also became one of the problems. Um, we can still go back, not to the drawing board, but we can still go back and see where to compromise and to move forward to see if this can really be introduced into the assembly that's possible and possibly head to referendum. I think those were some of the issues, but just identifying some of these key issues, there are other issues there which I believe to me are more of my personal opinion and my personal observation as to what the country can or cannot do. Certain things may look good in the books of certain countries, whether it's the United States or whether it's Kenya or Malawi or Senegal or France or England. It may look good and it will be good for us to have it. But do we have the resources and the financial support in order to implement those things like some of those countries, like in the United States and also in or other European countries are doing? So we need to figure out if we have the capability. And those are personal opinions. But again, looking at some of these three basic issues I brought up should tell, would let anybody know that this was going to face a challenge.
Thank you so much, Samsudin Afati. Now, the National Association of Vocational and Skills Training Institute, representing all technical and vocational education and training, hold a press briefing on 22nd September at Lasting Solutions to express their frustration and disappointment with the continued closure of training institutions, skill centers, and the lack of support from their regulatory body, line ministry, and government by extension since the closure. The technical and vocational education and training business were ordered to close for business to minimize the spread of the coronavirus since the declaration of the first state of emergency on the 7th of March 2020. As law-abiding citizens and as institutions training future leaders, we applied without reservations, while we remain closed. We have watched with utter dismay the partial or full easing of restrictions for almost all other sectors of the economy. It has been 6 months, and up till the recent easing of restrictions, nothing tangible has been said about the trade centers. The impact of such closure has an overreaching impact on the institutions, the trainers, lecturers, the students, and the country as a whole. During this period, the training institutions did not generate any revenue, knowing they relied solely on school fees. According to Abdullah Sow, chairman of National Association of Vocational and Skills Training Institute, said they were heavily expecting government institutions to cover us, but we were unfortunately and unfairly left out, he lamented. I am joined by Demba Sala, PRO of the National Association of Vocational and Skills Training Institute. Thank you so much for joining us. What efforts have you taken so far, writing to the authorities concerned?
Thank you very much for having me on your forum. First of all, I just want to clarify certain misconceptions regarding NAFSTI. Most people think NAFSTI is a private, TVET, or institutional organizations. No, it is consists of both public and private institutions. It's an umbrella organization of all TVET institutions in the Gambia, and it is a voluntary organization. It is not by force that every TVET institution should be a member, but most of the TVET members or institutions in the Gambia subscribes to the beliefs of NAFSTI. Having said that, the formation of the association is to further strengthen the capacities of these TVET centers. In that, we partner, we collaborate, such that TVET or skills education is enhanced in the Gambia. Now, coming to your question, we all know this is a global pandemic and it affects every sector of our society. Now, 1 month or 2 months into the lockdown, as an executive, we thought we need to engage our memberships to assess or to get to understand how did this COVID impact on their activities. Some online surveys were sent, and we received some responses, but it's quite difficult to, disheartening to note that most of the centers were suffering in meeting their operational, expenses, such as payment of their staff salaries and payment of rent. So we thought, and again, there was a second announcement of the extension of the state of emergency. So it was like, wow, this cannot continue because already centers are dying. So what is it that we can do? So all that time, we were hoping definitely the government, through our line ministry, should have been aware of our situation, because he who feels it knows it. So, but with all that, we did not hear from them, we did not see them. So we thought we need to engage them. Then as an executive, we had a meeting and we decided to write. And then from those responses we had from the centers, we thought, let's try to solicit financial support to help them, at least in the meantime, to settle those operational expenses. We sent it after some weeks or so, we did not receive any response. So we had to go back to the Ministry of Higher Education. First we write to the ministry and then copy to NACA, the regulatory body. But when we went there, we were told that they also definitely are concerned, and they had written to the authorities, that is through the office of the vice president, and they are waiting for response. We were being asked to be patient, which we understand. It takes a process. We had to come back, but there again came the second state of emergency announcement, and we thought, wow, this is not something that is going anytime soon. And it's like we have to come up with a strategy. So we thought, coincidentally, the University of Gambia also was to do their exams, and they had to finish their lectures. Some arrangements were made by government for them to have these online lectures. For us, but unfortunately, we were also hoping that that same thing could be accorded to some of the TVET centers that are offering programs that could be offered online. Here, we know that there are some, skills training that cannot be offered online because they are basically hands-on, but that did not happen. In fact, some of the centers voluntarily tried to explore this online through some pilot programs. But as you are aware, internet is very expensive in this country. Eventually, they had to, stop because they cannot sustain it. And we then had to write again, meeting NACA this time around as the regulatory body to at least engage the ministry to further emphasize our plight, but to no avail. We also sat again, thought of, why don't we use the media? Then we were invited to GRTS and some few radio stations where, we emphasize or we share our plight with the Gambian populace. But still, we haven't still received any response, neither from, the authorities, nor from NACA. So we thought of at least having, a press conference such that the wider populations would hear us, and then probably through that some actions would be done. Okay. And so far, that was the essence of having the press conference.
What are your demands?
I want to here acknowledge the efforts of the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, because throughout this pandemic, in as much as there had been, they also tried some of these radio programs and TV programs. But even apart from that, they had been in consultation with their partners in form of workshops or even some training packages in preparation of post-COVID. These were things that we would have been expected from the Ministry of Higher Education, but it did not come. So we thought, okay, now let's engage them again, because we are not certain when this thing would be over. So we solicited audience with the permanent secretary, and our reason for seeking audience with him was to try to propose to him that, listen, we were not able to get financial support. And as it is, most centers would be shut down for good, because even if whereas they were allowed to operate, they cannot meet their operational cost areas. And now, if this thing has to go any more or any further, it means others also would die. Now, we want to suggest to come up with measures, or even suggested to them that, like, we want government through you to allow us to operate by, observing certain measures. We even suggested, like, if a class is, let's say, 10, we could reduce the class size to 5, while observing the Ministry of Health's guidelines, such as, having sanitizers, washing your hands, handheld thermometers, checking body temperature of students coming in and out of the centers, and also making sure that they put on face masks. And again, we wouldn't mind. We even suggested that we wouldn't mind even to reduce the contact hours. If they were having, let's say, 3 contact hours for a particular, period, we could reduce it to 1.5 hours, just to make sure that they also are engaged and we also have some small revenue. But what the response we have with the meeting with the permanent secretary was that, well, we are hopeful that government will come with, an announcement or a declaration pretty soon. Shortly 2 days or 3 days after there was this announcement, but there was no mention of, opening of schools or tertiary TVET institutions for that matter.
Okay.
What is the way forward? Are you planning of reopening your institutions even if the government fails to meet your demands?
No, we would never do that, because we are law-abiding citizens and we are Gambians, and we are here to contribute in the development of the country. Now, what we are saying as we are calling on the ministry to engage us, we are partners. We know what is affecting this sector more than any one of them. So let's us, work together, because this is not one man's show. Let them engage us. We all sit together and try to come up with a solution to this problem. Because none of them, even the Ministry of Health, cannot definitively tell you or tell us that this thing could finish or could end within this period of time, within this day. So because of that, we have to come up with a plan, because life has to move on. So, but we thought even after this press conference, we would have at least received some invitation or at least some suggestions from the ministry, but nothing. Now, what we are saying is we need to go next to meet the National Assembly Select Committee on Education, hopefully next week. And the reason for going there is just like we did in the press conference and on all the forums we use. That is to share our plight and also to seek support and to solicit intervention. That's all we need. Now, and we are still open to any kind of consultation, be it the ministry or, international development partners. We want to get back to business in every way possible. But like we are not a rebellion group, that needs to be very clear. We are not rebelling. We those need people to understand, and government particularly to understand, that TVET education equally matters. Yes.
Now, African descendants residents in Gambia that have repatriated permanently have raised concerns about their own inclusion in the recent 2020 draft constitution. They spread the recent report drafted by CRC, including Section 118, that raised to an exception clause for the African descendants of the enslaved. Section 188 suggests a reduction in the current 15-year wait for citizenship by way of naturalization to 4 years. 8,315 African descendants have signed a petition in support of automatic citizenship for African descendants on the Change.org organization's website. Juliet Ryan, the co-founder of almost 3 million views, and her husband Ahmed Rion were, like many other reported, very upset and deeply troubled by the omission. The Council of African Descendants organized a press briefing on the aforementioned situation. To shed light on this story, I'm joined by Juliet Rain, an African descendant resident in the Gambia. Juliet, thank you for joining us. The Gambian National Assembly has rejected the draft constitution bill. What is your fate, I mean the whole court at large?
Going to continue. I mean, in a sense, I mean, you've got to remember that the material code essence of the constitution for us was that we would be included in it. And so we wasn't included in the 1997 constitution, but we were given automatic citizenship via the president, your former president. And obviously you have a new constitution. We weren't included in it. So the impact to us, I mean, don't get me wrong, I do understand that there are other far-reaching impacts for, you know, all of us living here. But ultimately, if you're going to consult the people and you're going to take their input, then allow their input to be input into the constitution. So if you're going to be very selective as to what you're putting in and what you're not putting in, it's obviously, you know, going to create some upset. And I guess that is a result of the upset. If you're going to make retrospective and retroactive laws, you know, there's gonna have impact. So one has to consider what one is doing in terms of constitution. You've got to remember that where I was actually born, remember that I am a product of slavery. So I am an African descendant, which is a byproduct of slavery. And so I come via your colonial ex-controllers. And your ex-colonial controllers have an unwritten constitution. So consider this. Your colonial masters who have an unwritten constitution have given you a written constitution. So you have to start looking at the questions around how you have your own systems. You run for Africans by Africans, because all you're doing is importing the same colonial problems that you had. And so you're going to inherit the same colonial issues over and over and over again.
Very well then. What are your demands?
Well, you know, we would like automatic citizenship. That has always been our request. And this has been our demand also, because when asking for citizenship, we already have African citizenship because we know we're Africans. The AU have stated that we're Africans. Even the 8th region here confers that we're Africans. What we want is the restoration of our citizenship. The same as what the Ghanaian president has done. And he stated very clearly, both the current president and the ex-president has stated that, you know, if you're black, you're an African. And the second thing they stated is the fact that if you cannot be given citizenship, they can only restore it. They can't give us something that we already have. So our birthright cannot be taken away from us because, you know, we come to any African nation and they tell us we're not African. And, you know, you've got to look at, firstly, you know, we can trace slave ships and where they came from. It's Africa, it's African countries that didn't keep a log. The slave owners kept a log of where they took slaves from, and then we were given European names. And so some of us can trace some ships, some of our parents died, some of them were adopted, so you wouldn't be able to trace their lineage. So in a sense, it's an unfair task, and DNA is not a perfected science. So what I want the government to do is to grant us automatic citizenship using the method that we have prescribed. And the prescriptive method is something that is a suggestion around a process. And the process takes a total of 2 years. And it starts with, firstly, a certificate of citizenship, which gives you partial citizenship only, but entitles you to have equal rights, except for voting rights, essentially. But it means that we come in tow with your constitution. It means we come in tow with your laws and regulations, which is important, because we need to make it be feel that we're equals rather than outcasts. and foreigners and tourists. We're not foreigners and tourists, we live here. This is my home that I'm speaking from, I live here. Yeah, my child goes to school here, and I don't want him to wait till he's 24 before he can be considered a citizen here. That is totally unfair, it's unjust, and it's unequal, and we're discriminated against. So I want the president to understand that we no longer want to be discriminated against. The president used to live in England, so he knows what racism is. He knows where we're coming from. And also, Yahya Jammeh, your previous president, you know, for whether his wrongs and his rights, you know, understood our situation as well. And that's why during the Roots Festival, he granted us citizenship. Now that has, you know, now dissipated and disappeared. So we're left in no man's land. We're left hanging. And so we're asking, so automatic citizenship isn't something that you haven't had before. You've had it before. We're asking you to restore it.
Okay, so
and, you know,
steps
His Excellency Adama Barrow can restore it.
What steps are you planning ahead?
Well, several steps. The first step is that we've obviously got our own strategy, because this is not an isolated internal issue, because there are 200 million diasporans, yeah? And 200 million diasporans who want to come home all across Africa. So this isn't just, oh, we're just looking at Gambia because we live here. No, this is a Pan-African issue. And it is something that has to be dealt with because we are leaving the West. We want to stop giving our money to white countries, white families, white institutions, to white economies. We want to put our money back black. And so the way that needs to be done, and for us to come and reinvest our skills, our time, and our finances back into the black economy, is that we need to be treated as equals. We are Africans, whether you like it or whether you don't like it, we are Africans and you cannot deny us. So our strategy is that we have 3 steps. One is a media campaign, which you were involved in, which is an awareness campaign. Another is a desensitization campaign, which is going to the locals, going to the villages and explaining who we are, showing films, maybe using drama, using plays, using education, using pamphlets, using books to educate people with regard to our journey and how the transatlantic slavery affected us, and what chattel slavery is and was, and how it affected Gambia, because you're probably, one of your ancestors were probably one of the people that were actually taken in slavery, but you just don't know, because that history hasn't been passed down by griots or other people. So that's another aspect of what we're going to do. The last aspect that we're going to do is to obviously lobby the National Assembly, lobby members of Parliament, and lobby any body of influence. And obviously we want an audience with the president. We've been asking for this for a very long time. And so, you know, we've also been asking for an interview with Adama Barrow for our channel, for Blacksit. I've seen BBC come, Al Jazeera come. I've seen a whole heap of white media platforms come and all get an audience and get an interview with Adama Barrow. Yeah, you know, us as a black platform who's promoting the best of the best of the best of the Gambia, we don't get a look in. So I'm asking myself, what is going on? We have over nearly 3 million views. So this isn't just a situation that is, you know, just purely inside of Gambia. The world is watching Gambia, and for the right reasons, because it's a beautiful place with beautiful people. I see myself as Gambian. No one can't tell me I'm not. My grandma told me I am, I am.
The Gambian Armed Forces is currently struggling with violated ranks, one of many problems inherited from the 22 years of last government's unbridled German interference in the affairs of the country's armed forces. The army said it has now added 2 more infantry battalions to the previous 3 battalions as a way of dealing with the complex problem of having many ranks in a particular battalion. Armed Forces spokesman Major Lamin Asanyang added that natural attribution, capacity enrichment, and promotional exams are other measures that the Army has now embraced to deal with bloated ranks. Speaking to the Standard, Major Lamin Asanyang, GAF Director of Public Relations and Media, said the bloating of ranks in the Army is a delicate problem inherited from the previous government, adding that the force is trending carefully to find durable solutions to the predicament. It is a problem that we have inherited and we are working tirelessly to deal with it, as the case may be because these are Gambians and they have opted to join the armed forces to serve their country. So one has to be careful about how you go about the issues. So in an attempt to correct these blooded ranks, we have created 2 battalions that will allow us to post people there and at least reduce having that problem of having many ranks in one battalion, he lamented. Having registered a series of maternal deaths in the Gambia, a group of concerned citizens, Mbamba Care Foundation, in partnership with Gambian Women's Life Matter, hold a peaceful protest to show their dissatisfaction in the scary rise of maternal mortality in the Gambia. This is aimed at alerting government through the Ministry of Health and all the relevant stakeholders on the spike of maternal deaths in the country. A position paper is also expected to be delivered to the Minister of Health detailing some of the strategies organizers believe could be adopted to curb the worrisome trend of maternal deaths in the Gambia. The release stated. Block TV's Mariam Cisse was there and she filed in this report.
Following the scary rise in the number of maternal mortality rates in the country, concerned Gambians hit the street of Kairava Avenue protesting that government takes immediate action to end maternal mortality. In 2017, maternal mortality ratio for Gambians was 597 deaths per 100,000 live births. Maternal mortality ratio for the Gambia fell gradually from 931 deaths. Since 1996, it was demand imperative for the Gambia to map out clearly a social and economic development that aims at raising the standard of life, one of which is transforming hospitals in dynamic ones with adequate and medical facilities. Of recent, we've seen several women dying, giving birth due to negligence of nurses, lack of equipment, and sometimes inadequate medical facilities. The main referral hospital completed its investigation into the death of Fatou Diba, who was referred from the ASB hospital to the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital with completion after an operation, but was reportedly torn away as Dr. referred she had COVID-19. She reportedly spent more than 30 minutes in an ambulance. Menge Juve, who needed urgent blood transfusion, died because the midwife on duty were unable to administer her due to lack of equipment and inadequate training. Reading the petition on behalf of Mba Care Foundation was Sally Job, who highlighted on the need of their voice to be heard. By creating awareness on maternal mortality, she urged government to equip the hospital with standard equipment, improve the transportation system for referrals, which, if delayed, sometimes leads to excessive bleeding. Reporting for Block TV, I am Mariam Cisse.
That's all we have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and have a beautiful rest of your day. Enjoy the rest of our programs.